Welcome back to the Behind the Bricks podcast. This is episode 2 with Natalia, our in-house project manager. So let's get right into it. First of all, describe the project and then describe the team that you got involved in delivering that project.
Sure. So I think it might be worth us looking at 2 different projects.
Okay.
Just so that we can look at a main contractor example and a sort of we're the main contractor example as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we completed a project in Scarborough. It's 13 self-contained apartments. The project is miles away from us. It's a great project, but the issue and the challenge that we had from the start was that it's so far away. It's going to be extremely difficult for us to manage that as a main contractor. Purely from a perspective of, as a main contractor, you want to be available on site to meet surveyors, meet trades, make decisions, solve problems, like exactly what we've just said.
You want visibility, constant visibility.
Exactly. You want that, and you want to be there, and you also want to know what's going on as well. It's not just that people know that you're there. You want to know what the people there are doing and how they're working, and whether or not we are in program, we're not in program.
And so people might not understand how far away we are from Scarborough. So we are.
Yeah.
What is the drive to Scarborough from here?
So on a good day, we are looking at probably 3 hours.
Okay.
It does, on some nice, lovely days, take me about 4 hours to get there. So it can be quite.
And so that's deemed as too far.
Exactly.
So therefore, you went with the main contractor structure.
Yeah. So we got a main contractor involved, and then so the team at that point was, we had the main contractor or their representative. We had a QS from our side. He was there to essentially oversee the numbers, make sure that as the client we are on track and the main contractor's on track.
This is from the build side. So we've gone through design.
Yeah, correct.
Design, we had an architect.
Yeah. We've got an architect, we've got a structural engineer. The builder on that project actually assumed the M&E designer's role. Right. So we didn't have an M&E designer in place because he was comfortable doing the design. It was simple enough, so we were happy with that. We had a project manager, which was myself, and then we had the design team, obviously, so your architect and everyone else we sort of mentioned briefly in the previous segment. Okay.
How did that go?
All in all, the progress of the site went really well. He was one of those contractors that we sort of saw once a month, and the progress was great. We did hit some snags and some issues when it came to certain aspects of the build, with complications with things like we were building apartments where old chimney breasts were, and those chimney breasts were originally they weren't exposed, so we only found those after completing the demolition, which again was one of those things that the architect missed, because he wasn't aware of that situation, which is absolutely fine, because that does happen. But then what we're met with on site is having to get structural designs for managing that, because we were breaking through them, destabilizing the building. They were on the bottom floors, which meant there was a lot of load going through the rest of the building. How are we going to manage this? And one of the problem solving sort of aspects of that was us having to make the decision of how we want to proceed. So as the client, we would have incurred any costs with designing that out, plus then additional costs for completing any works, because the contractor, when he quoted for those works off the architect's drawings, he didn't quote for obviously having to manage that. So we had to make a decision of whether or not we find a way around it, or we do the full design and bear the costs of the additional work, should we say. And with that specific example, we actually got quite lucky, because once we were on site and we looked at the designs, we saw that there was a way to reconfigure the rooms, that we didn't actually have to go through the chimney breasts, and we could change the layouts of the apartments, granted making them a little bit odd shapes, or doing some weird configurations, but making it work, and
therefore mitigating for the cost of having to do all that stuff
again, so being able to save some money on that, so that was good. But that was that project, and I think having a main contractor that was so close to the job and us being so far away was a saving grace on that one.
Quite a tight little team then. Really, when you're choosing that main contractor, it sounds like, we're going to hear now, because we're going to see this difference in the size of the team between the main contractor and us being the main contractor. How long do you make that interview process when you're choosing your main contractor? Because it sounds like the communication between you and the main contractor is a really, really important part of it, and
100%.
that level of trust that you have with the main contractor.
100%.
So do you have quite a drawn out like recruitment phase or tendering phase to make sure that the communication between you is going to be sustainable and good for the next 12 months or whatever it is?
I mean, as daft as this sounds, is a lot of the time you get a feel for the people that you're going to be working with. So that's how responsive are they from the start? How much do they want the job? Are they willing to take phone calls? Are they pretty stubborn to start with?
Yeah.
Well, you get a lot of contractors and subcontractors is this common phrase of, oh, you wouldn't see my lads doing that, or who did that work for you? It's terrible. And as soon as you get someone on site that are like this, they're going to be the exact same.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating. But when people are like that with you from the get-go, and they're like, oh no, I wouldn't do this like that, or that design's terrible, like, sometimes you accept it to a degree because they might be right, but a lot of the time it's like this big headedness that I quite dislike, and I'm very open about it. I don't like working with people that are difficult from the start, or like to show who wears the big boots, essentially. So I think you get a feel for the people that you work with, but on a more sort of serious and like office based, what do we do? You'll send out a tender to multiple people, and a lot of the times I would strongly recommend either knowing the contractors that you're working with personally, or having used them on previous jobs or smaller jobs. And obviously I know that's not possible when you're first getting into it, but do word of mouth, talk to your subcontractors. Have they worked with any main contractors? Again, that's really difficult when we're based in Morrington and the job is all the way in Scarborough, 4 hours away from us, because word of mouth is almost impossible for us. But you do find ways around it. You do know, quantity surveyors who know people in the area.
Of course.
Contractors who are willing to travel, and you do find ways around it, but that process can be a little bit longer and a bit more extended. But I would 100% say it's worth working with people who you either know or through word of mouth.
Okay, and you were going to move on to the other project that you wanted to tell us about, which is which one?
It's Bridge Road, and that is in Warrington.
Okay, so just on the doorstep.
Yeah, just on the doorstep. So I wasn't involved with that project from the start because it started sort of prior to me joining Sourced. But I was involved with it from sort of like the mid-section to the end.
So the decision to be the main contractor was made before you were here.
Correct, yeah.
And the design team was set up and had done their business.
Yeah, so funnily enough with that one, there was a little bit of contention in the design team from the start. So there was one architect involved with the build, but that architect didn't want to be involved as the principal designer, which we discussed previously.
Okay. And you don't have a main contractor to take on the principal designer role, right?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
But from our perspective, it only made sense for that role to be assumed by them, and because of our funding, etc., we needed someone to assume that role. And it didn't make sense for anyone else to take it, so ultimately we had to change the architects partway through the build for someone else to take that on. So that added a level of complication, I guess, to it. And I don't think it's ever good to disturb a project team in that sense, but it does happen, and you do have to do what you have to do sometimes. And I will say that those guys, when they didn't want to assume that role, it was still very early on from when.
So the design team is going to be fairly similar whether you're the main contractor or not, because they're not part of that design team. But now we move on to the build team.
Yeah, correct.
How is the build team different?
So on that project, we obviously needed someone on site. So we did have a site manager. We had a QS that was sort of like a contracts manager as well. So they performed both of those roles, and in that sense, all it means is they were in charge of getting all the quotes for all of your trades, going through them, making sure that your numbers stacked up, and perform sort of both of those roles at once, which you do see quite a lot. We had a pre-construction manager, a project manager, health and safety coordinator, utilities coordinator. We had site labourers, and then obviously we had all of our site subcontractors for the works. And
now you're managing, or your role from before you started is managing all of those people.
Correct, yeah.
Not just the individual main contractor who then cascades down to manage all those people.
Correct.
Which kind of project do you prefer? The Scarborough project or the Bridge Road project?
I think
because if one of those trades doesn't turn up, right, the electrician's not turned up today, you're sorting it out.
Yeah.
And if the electrician doesn't turn up, then the chippy's on your back, or the plasterer's on your back, because he needs the electrician to finish, because he needs to do his work.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, how does that go down?
I do think it depends on things like distance and whatnot, and it depends on what you want to get out of the project and how many projects you're managing.
Yeah.
So if you're doing 5 or 6 or 7 projects at once, you ideally want to have the main contracted out, because your responsibility isn't just for the site. You're like the person who's overseeing everything, so you've got a lot of time to manage between every job. If you're doing just one job, then sure, give it a go. It might be rewarding, you might enjoy it, and you do see you reap the benefits of that ultimately, because you save a bit of money, don't you?
Yeah.
Because your main contractor will take a cut out of the whole project value, whereas ultimately you're the person who secures that. So it's a win-win for you if you're able to manage it and you have the capacity to do it. I think where things go wrong is when you don't have the capacity to oversee a project correctly. And like I said to you, if someone raises a problem to me today and I sit on it for a few days because I don't have the time to fix that project right now, because the priority list is massive, and what you see is that project still being here, that issue still being here a few days down the line, and you still have to save that, but now you've lost a few days worth of maybe work. Like you said, if he doesn't show up or he doesn't do what he's told, the next guy doesn't show up, and it causes a ripple effect, and then you're the person who's ultimately responsible for that ripple effect.
Yeah. Well, I can see that people would think, like, if you do a small house flip, and they're managing just a couple of trades, and these trades that they're managing are just one person comes in and does a bit of electrician work, or does a bit of plastering or whatever, that they think, well, I've managed a project because they've managed a small flip. But then moving into a commercial conversion or moving into a new build, do you think that qualifies them to then manage this kind of team? Obviously there are more people involved in the design phase, and there's more responsibility in the build phase, but just because somebody's managed a small project, do you think that means that they can immediately step up and successfully manage something that's a lot bigger? I
think my question is how successful were you with your flips? How did you find them? Because if you absolutely hated them and you drowned every single time you did a flip, and you felt overwhelmed and whatnot, so this probably isn't the avenue for you. Or maybe if it is, then why don't you employ a project manager and you sort of oversee it as a client, so you get the feel for it, you get your footings, you get to see what happens on a day-to-day without actually having to do too much to overwhelm yourself. Essentially, you get to learn on the job. And then as you take on more projects, you then slowly build up how active you are with them. But yeah, I'd say 100% depends on people. Like, we have a 17 apartment conversion of like an office floor, and we have a smaller project that's five houses with a few sparks, just to the finishing touches of them. So you see 1 or 2 sparks going around site, commissioning the houses, plugging up the heat pumps, doing the final touches. And then you arrive at this other site, which is 17 apartments. You've booked in the sparks, you've booked in the plumbers, and you arrive at site and it's absolutely flooded with people. And you look at it and it's a bit overwhelming, because you see pipes cut in here, you see holes being drilled there, and it's so much, so quickly. And the contrast of doing that, which I guess is what you would expect if you were doing a flip, a couple of trades, like you said, to then being flooded with like 10, 15 guys at once, all working in different areas, completing the same stuff. You've got people moaning about people moving their tools, you've got people moaning about, I don't know, toilets, access, this, and it's like 101 things at once. So the jump from one to the other is big. But it doesn't mean it has to be overwhelming or it has to be impossible, because ultimately you've got to take the step at some point, don't you?
But a recommendation would be employ a project manager, so take the hit on the cost, but sort of shadow the project manager. Exactly.
You can be a site presence, so you could even work from site if you wanted to, but you could just oversee them and shadow them and see what they're doing. And I was quite lucky when I started here that I had someone who I shadowed and who oversaw me essentially, and I was able to learn from quite a lot when it came to site knowledge and how you would go about these issues. Because I remember showing up on site my first day, and I was so overwhelmed. Like, we were just walking through, and it was just like, what about this? What about this? What about that? From like million and one angles. Like, oh, how would you want me to deal with this? And I was like, how would you even know how to deal with this? But you just learn and figure out that you make decisions, and you just got to back your decisions sometimes.
So we've mentioned a lot of different trades. We've mentioned lots of different people that are going to be involved in either one of these teams, the design team or the build team.
Yeah.
Let's make it really succinct. And I think something that a lot of people can relate to is football.
Yeah.
So if you were putting a five-a-side football team together,
Yeah.
who's going to be your star player? That's the first person that you list on your team sheet. Who's going to be your captain, and who definitely gets a red card, and is like the last on the list?
Are we including? Okay, so my original.
It's in your nature to negotiate, isn't it? You say five-a-side, I want six.
Okay, fine. So my original team would be an architect.
Yeah.
A health and safety advisor.
Wow, really?
Yeah. A QS. A project manager. And your subcontractors. And I know I'm cheating with saying subcontractors, but I feel like I found a loophole and I'm going to run with it.
So you wouldn't go with the main contractor? Because surely the main contractor would then...
Well, I wouldn't
all those subcontractors.
I wouldn't really do a five-a-side team for a main contractor, because they would be doing all of it. I would just be in the background, wouldn't I?
Okay, all right.
Would be a boring team.
But who would be your captain?
Not to be big-headed, but I'd make the project manager the captain.
Okay.
And that's purely because you oversee the project from the start to the end. And when there are problems, and sometimes if you have a site manager, the problems, the small problems might not reach you every single day, but you are going to get so many problems, and you are going to be the person who's dealing with them. So why not be the captain and lead the team? And
so who would get a red card? And I think what we mean by a red card is who just wouldn't be included in the team because their reliability.
Oh.
Not somebody who you've included in the team and then you've given a red card. Somebody who you just say, actually, I'm gonna.
Oh, that's thrown me.
There you are. That's good.
Yeah, because I was going to give it to subcontractors. Because they either don't show up, they always kick up a fuss. Yeah. There's always drama with the subbies, so no offence to any subbies listening. Just a disclaimer.
Alienated.
Any of the guys that work with us.
And you're great, we love you.
I don't mean it. Okay.
Show up at 9 o'clock, please. Thanks very much.
Please still be there on Monday, whenever this comes out.
Who would you really not consider as part of your team? Sort of push back.
That's quite tough, but I think maybe like a pre-construction manager or a contracts manager if you're doing smaller developments. Obviously, if you're working for massive companies, then these roles have every right to be fulfilled, and they will have a lot of responsibility. But if you're doing smaller projects, and like for example us, I don't think we need a pre-contracts manager or a pre-construction manager or a contracts manager, because we're able to assume those roles within our team. And I think sometimes from our perspective as well, it's good to have the knowledge of who you're going out to quote into, because like I said, I personally like to get a feel for who I'm getting quotes from, because I've had people that haven't been so great from the quote stage, and that has reflected in the works, and I think I've learned from that, so I'm quite strict with that. So
Nat, what are your top tips for the entire putting these two teams together?
I think you're going to want, first one has to be plan your project. So that means appoint your team, your subcontractors, make plan schedules, and only then go. Don't try and start before you're in a position where you know what's going on, you know who's on your team, you know who's been appointed, because you do see that time and time again, and then there's a lot of frustration when things aren't on scales, because it's so difficult to then, we discussed everything that's covered in your role. Imagine being on a site and working on a project, but then still having to appoint contractors because you haven't done that at the start, or still working out little niggles and designs. You're doing so much as it is on site already, without then having to have the additional stress of not being prepared. So I think that's one of my top tips. I think an important one is don't try to walk before you crawl. Don't take on too much, and I think we have covered that as well with the you know, if you're going from flips and renovations and you want to get into developments, don't just try and do too much at once. If you're not comfortable being the main contractor, don't appoint a main contractor and get a feel for how they work, get a feel for how things are on site. And you know, it's not going to hurt if you're on site once a week, twice a week, you know, once every 2 weeks, get a feel for how they work, how do their schedules work, what do the costings look like. Then, like we said, you know, maybe appoint a project manager who oversees everything, or a site manager, and you sit with them, you figure out how this works, how everything falls in together. Because I feel like that is a lot of what we do, is like seeing how everything pieces together, and like what order do we do things, you know, when do we schedule things. And it's part obviously of what we covered today, but I think that is quite important. Don't try and take on too much before you should.
And part of that as well, especially when you're looking at the schedule, is the cost of that, right? Is the cost of all of these people.
Yeah.
You need to plan out when these people are going to cost you money. So the quicker you can put that together, because that's another problem you need to solve. And then if you're going to a funder who's funding the project for you, when are they going to release the funds that you then have access to then pay these people? And you as that main project manager need to coordinate all of those things coming together.
Exactly. Yeah, that's just another thing on your list. I'd say another thing is be organised. Keep logs of everything, save documents, stay in touch with building control and warranties, because the last thing you want is for anything that goes wrong on site or isn't done to design. And there are aspects of design that are missed by your architect. And if you're not coordinating with building control and confirming that the building control are happy with everything that's happening on site, and you proceed, that is going to cost you money. If then now building control show up and they say, hold on a second, like, you've done this wrong, let's go back a few steps, because then you're redoing work that you didn't necessarily have to do.
Yeah.
So stay on top of that. I think make sure you have all of your designs and reports ready and coordinated. Don't wait till the last minute, because ultimately what you're going to do, and I think a lot of people tend to focus on this, is you get in, you start building, you want to build, because in your mind, when you have the completed project, when everything's done, that is when you get your money, you get your big payday, you finally completed, you get to sell all your units, you're the big developer. But that's not going to happen. That day's not going to come unless you've got all of your reports, all of your designs, you've satisfied building control, you've satisfied warranties, everything is signed off. You need so many tests afterwards. Is everything in line? And you're not going to get that big day until all of that is there and ready for that big day, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's so important to stay on top of that throughout your build, because that's going to save you so much time and stress.
So patience really is a virtue.
Oh yeah, 100%. But yeah, and I think another one is, as well as be organised, and a part of that is it doesn't hurt for you to know your building regs. And I'm not saying know them in and out, because I'm pretty sure there's like a 3,000 page document that you'd be looking at. That's not your role, and it's not your responsibility to know them 100% to a T. That's your building officer who looks after that.
Yeah.
But as a main contractor, even project manager, it doesn't hurt for you to know what they are, how they could impact your build. And every build, whether you do, I don't know, a commercial refurb, a commercial flip to a residential, new builds, the regs that there are at the moment are going to impact you differently. And for those who don't know, and like your approved documents and things like that are essentially like a prescribed list of almost like checkboxes of things you are allowed to do or you should do on a build. Obviously recently after Grenfell, a massive one is your fire regs, and they get updated periodically with new information and sort of new, I guess, blueprints of how you need to complete your builds. So it doesn't hurt for you to have a good idea or a rough idea of how your build is going to be impacted by these.
Yeah. Any other tips?
I guess what I've said before is be prepared and available to make decisions on site if you are assuming the main contractor role, even if you're not, but be prepared to make decisions, and you will need to make decisions. There's no shying away from that. So going into it thinking, oh, I'll be fine, you're not if you're not prepared to do this. And it could be silly trivial things like, what do you want to do with this drainage run? Where do we want to put this? Can we alter this? Are you happy for me to complete this way? Or it's just little snap decisions that you are going to have to make. So don't be afraid to make those.
Because like we said, most of your time is either spent planning or problem solving.
Yeah.
So give us an example. So there were a couple of problems that you're going to have to solve about drainage or whatever. Give us some examples of other problems that you would experience, that you would have to solve.
Okay.
In your role.
A really recent one. We have a design for a staircase. We have a house that we're building, and the staircase goes one way. But we get on site, and in theory, on plans, and as built, should fit perfectly. You should have the right headroom. You should have the right turns.
But
the joiners get to site, and we don't have that. So it's a case of.
So how did that happen? Or is that just somebody that's measured incorrectly?
Yeah, sometimes it'll be a measure that's incorrect. The architect didn't allow enough allowance on his plans.
Yeah.
The builders built a little bit off levels in terms of like the floor space, etc. These things do happen.
So now
it's a case of, do we flip the staircase? But if we flip the staircase, there's another staircase. So where's that staircase going to go?
Yeah.
So we ultimately made a decision to sort of put a little sort of cow head on them, and then basically a turn onto the stairs to move where the headroom's going to be required.
Yeah.
That's worked for us, but that's one decision. We've had another decision where we've gotten to site. The houses it was a timber frame, so the timber frames are up, and we get in, and these are houses that are sort of selling for your average, I don't know, maybe £400 to £600, and £1,000. Sorry, yeah. And we get inside, and one of the living rooms is absolutely tiny, and we're like, okay, so where's the kitchen? And the kitchen's in this sort of nice big open sort of bifolds, roof lantern, but the way the kitchen sits, there's no island in the kitchen, it's just on one of the walls. So you'd have a very, very odd space essentially, but the architect hasn't picked up on this on his plans, and we're only seeing this now that the timber frame is up and we can actually stand and get a feel in this room.
Yeah.
So we ultimately need to make a decision of whether or not we go with what's on plan and go with this, pretty odd feel for a place, or judging by the end value of what we're building, do we want to tweak things inside? And ultimately we went for a bit of a tweak, and we had to amend the plans, which obviously cost us a little bit, and move the drainage around a little bit, but ultimately I think we're squeezing out a better value from the houses because of what we're building. And again, that was another decision that
what we had to do. Did you incorporate that smaller room into the bigger room and then make it a
yeah, so we actually made it open plan. And so what it was you came into a house, and then you had your staircase right ahead of you, and going past your staircase you had a little hallway. That hallway ultimately led into that sort of bifold open plan space where the kitchen was supposed to be. But then just before that hallway started, and sort of where the stairs were, you had another door, and as you went through that door there was just like a little room in there, but that room was also open space. So that room sort of ultimately led out into the living room or the kitchen, and
I get you.
That area. So in our eyes we had an absolutely pointless corridor, like a hallway that was just leading into another room that you could access through this other door. So what we did is we blocked up the hallway, created a utility in that space, and moved the kitchen to be where the front room was supposed to be. So now you enter your house, you've got the staircase in front of you. Instead of having a hallway, you've got a utility room that's obviously locked up and whatnot, and then to your right you've got a door. You go through that door and now you're in your kitchen, and it's an open plan kitchen that leads out into a nice big open living space that's got the roof lantern above it.
Got you.
So worked out much better, but it's just one of those things that you've got to be prepared to.
How long did it take you to solve that? Was that just like spending the afternoon on site, standing in around, sort of imagining or putting things on the ground for where the kitchen was going to be and where the other things were going to be?
We had a walk through with it on site, got a feel for, took some measures in terms of, we toyed with the idea of having a kitchen island, but then you have like an allowance for how big's your worktop. You need a bit of a walking space, your island, and then are we going to have enough walking space? Is the island ultimately going to make it more cluttered, etc.? So with that, we took the measures on site with where everything was as it is, marked up that on plan. I then contacted the kitchen suppliers, got the measurements of them for their worktops, their kitchen island, how much space they would typically see between the two, etc. And then drew out a few versions of the plans and then went with the one that was sort of made the most sense, which was what we did on site.
Gotcha. What is the worst situation that you've walked into?
Oh. Do you know what? There's been quite a few. There's been quite a lot. Just an example of a really frustrating one was we had a site that had dragged on and had so many issues. You know, everything felt like it was going wrong, but we were finally turning a corner. We installed all the flooring. We've had all the painters and decorators in. You know, the place was actually looking in top shape. The flooring guys, I think, finished on a Thursday. We had some cleaners on a Friday, so they did like a final sweep. We were ready for like our snaggers, our mastic guys, just to do some final touches on the Monday. And then over the weekend, a manifold blew. So all of the flooring, and I'm not talking about like a single unit, we're talking about, this is an apartment block. So all of the flooring in that apartment block on the ground floor, like I'd probably say about 50% of it, like all the carpet tiles, was soaking wet through. Then it's a case of, well, water's so hard to get out of. It's not like we could just come and mop it up because it's now seeped into the carpet tiles.
Was this a site that was quite close to you, or was this one of the sites that was
This was
remote?
the site that was quite close to us.
Okay.
And we had to get, you know, tons of dryers in, trying to dry it all out. We had to get the carpet fitters back out. Then you've got to get the joiners in because the skirts are now seeping through.
Right, yeah, of course.
You'll then have to get the painters back in. And it was just one of those, like a proper kick in the teeth, because it's like you're finally getting there with that site. You're basically done. You know, you're excited, you're snagging, you're getting all the sign-off docs. You know, you're there, you're complete. And all of a sudden it's like, oh,
and this site just wouldn't let go of you.
No, it wouldn't.
Like, you can't leave me alone.
We were convinced it was haunted for a while. So I mean, we managed to get through it. I think another pretty stressful one was we had a main contractor appointed on a site, and we probably went through a good 6 to 9 months with that contractor on site. We almost completed phase 1, so it was like the top 2 floors of the building. We were moving on to second phase, which was the ground floor. Things are going well, and they say to us, when are the utilities going in? And we say to them, well, you guys are doing the utilities. And then it became that, you know, that Spider-Man meme where everyone's pointing at each other. So it was that. But I think if anyone knows utilities, they know how much of a horrible and long process it is to get anything approved and on site. So we ultimately came to the conclusion that we are going to deal with it. But at that point, it was so late on. It was a complete scramble of having to put in the applications ourselves for all of the water, all of the electrics. There was no gas on site, which was quite good. I mean, it was an office block conversion. It was, you know, 40, 50 plus flats. So it wasn't a small build either. So this was a big issue.
Yeah.
And obviously, you're not going to sign off a building and get that end day that I was talking about until you've got your utilities on site.
Yeah.
So that was a massively stressful moment. And it was, again, one of those things where it's like, this issue isn't going away. We need to solve it and get through it. So that was very stressful.
So one, a problem that you couldn't really predict the manifold blowing, and the other one, maybe going back to your processes for the contracts, for the design phase, and just having those the real distinction of who is responsible for what with your main contractor.
Exactly. Okay, Chris, did you know that 92% of large projects exceed budget, time, or scope, and
budget, time, and scope, or one of those three things?
One of those three, right, or all, like at least one of those three.
Okay.
And less than 1% of projects actually finish on time.
No way.
That's a crazy, scary statistic, but it's just the reality of construction.
Is that because, I mean, what is on time? That's just a prediction that's made by somebody who's tendering for a contract, right? So saying, do that in 16 weeks.
Exactly.
But you're likely to go with the person that says that they can do it in 16 weeks rather than the person that says that they can do it in 24
100%.
weeks, right?
100%. I think another one of those factors is, another stat is that approximately 75% of projects experience scope creep throughout the project lifecycle, which for those who don't know, it means that the project increases in, I guess, like the description of what you want, like the end value of it to be. So, you know, we could say we're building a project with no lifts and all of a sudden we want a lift, or, you know, it could be more trivial things than that, but ultimately that scope creep adds time in the long run as well.
Natalia, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Chris.
That was really, really interesting.
Thanks.
If we get any questions, if you want to ask Natalia any questions, then forward them to us we've got a podcast email, haven't we? podcast@source.co. Forward your emails to podcast@source.co. We make sure that Natalia replies to you. Thanks. A huge thanks to Natalia for sharing her knowledge, her experience, and her insight into project management over the last 2 episodes. I really hope it's provided some value for you, especially for you guys who are just starting out, or you've been concentrating on flips and you're looking at scaling up into a bigger project or a bigger development, and you were unsure as to how the structure of that team's going to work, because obviously you need more people in that team to deliver such a big thing. So really hope that it's helped you and given you some insight into what you need to do, or what a team should look like in the bigger deals. As always, if you've liked the podcasts, please like, comment and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.